Hello and welcome to today's Proven Learning Series session on workflow automations. This course introduces users to the workflow functionality within Proven Jobs, designed to standardize processes, ensure compliance, and enhance visibility throughout the job's lifecycle. Whether you're managing mitigation, contents, or reconstruction, workflows help guide your team through consistent step-by-step tasks tailored to your business. This session recording will be available in our PSA Help library and on our company's YouTube channel. If you have any questions following today's session, please don't hesitate to contact our PSA support team at support@canamsys.com. For today's session agenda, we'll begin by reviewing the required role security permissions that must be configured by your company's proven job administrator or by a user with the appropriate security permissions. Next, we'll explore the process of setting up workflows in the company settings. This includes defining workflow criteria, identifying triggers, establishing exception criteria, and, if applicable, configuring reminders to support workflow completion. Finally, we'll demonstrate how end users can engage and complete workflows directly within the job file on the Proven Jobs web application or via the Control Center or on the Proven Jobs mobile application. We will begin by reviewing the required role security permissions. Within Proven Jobs, navigate to the main menu settings, Roles. Select the Edit button next to the desired role. Select Jobs. Scroll down and select Workflow Setup. These security permissions are typically assigned to only the administrator role or to the role that will be responsible for creating and maintaining the company's workflow and company settings. Create allows the user to create a new workflow in the company settings. Delete allows the user to delete an existing workflow already set up in the company settings. Duplicate allows the user to duplicate an existing workflow in the company settings. Edit allows the user to edit an existing workflow already set up in the company settings. Incomplete allows the user to enable the incomplete checkbox option within the workflow in the company settings. When enabled, incomplete is an optional workflow status that can be selected by the end user when satisfying the workflow at the job level. View allows the user to view the workflow setup hyperlink in the company settings menu and view the existing workflows in the company settings. As always, if changes are made to the role security permissions, make sure to select the Save button before navigating away. You will want to repeat this step for each applicable role security. Please note, changes made to the role security permissions can take up to 5 minutes to update and reflect in the applicable user accounts. To ensure users have the appropriate security permissions in place to satisfy a workflow at the job level, company administrators will need to navigate again to the Settings, Roles, and click the Edit button next to the applicable role security. Select Jobs. Select Jobs again. And here we'll see a list of security permissions for the job. We'll want to review the Mobile Sync All Jobs allows the user to view all open jobs in the mobile application. The Mobile Sync Only Scheduled Jobs allows the user to view only scheduled jobs in the mobile application. View allows the user the ability to view all jobs in the web application. And View Own allows the user the ability to view only the jobs that they have been assigned to under the Job Relationships tab. Also want to review the Allow Workflow Incomplete. This security permission allows the user the ability to mark the workflow incomplete. Note, the ability to mark a workflow incomplete can only be done from the Proven Jobs web application. A workflow cannot be marked incomplete in the mobile application at this time. Again, if any changes are made to the role security permissions, navigate to the Save button before navigating away. Now that the user role securities have been established, the desired workflows can be created in the company settings by the company administrator. will again navigate to the main menu settings, company settings, select jobs, scroll down, and select Edit Workflow Setup. Within the Workflow Setup screen, we are presented with a list of active workflows. You have the ability to view and edit those existing workflows by clicking the Edit button, or we can delete the existing workflow by selecting the Delete button. We also have the ability to create a new workflow or duplicate an existing workflow. For today's demonstration, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the workflows that we've created for the job type of ZZZ emergency. Before we go in and take a look at the specific workflow here, you'll notice that there are many workflows set up for this particular job type. This is not uncommon as we have several steps in most of our job type processes. And you'll notice that we'll see some snippets of details of the workflow itself here in the setup menu. We'll see the description of the workflow title, the due by, the starting trigger for the workflow, as well as the ending trigger. You will also notice that the ending trigger of one workflow will typically become the starting trigger of the next workflow. This allows us to keep our workflow tasks to go in sequence, that as we complete one workflow, it triggers the next workflow in sequence. In our example here, we have our receive date to contacted date with the contacted date satisfying the first workflow, but triggering the next workflow in sequence. Then going to the inspected date being completed, then triggering the third workflow, and the actual start date being the next ending trigger. So we get this piggyback effect of one workflow completing and starting the next workflow. This is not a requirement, but typically recommended, so we make sure that the workflow moves forward for each applicable task that is needed for the job file. To view a specific workflow, we're going to go ahead and click the Edit button. The Workflow Setup Create screen is separated into 6 sections that the company administrator will need to complete before the workflow is functional. Those sections are Criteria, Start Trigger, End Trigger, Due and Warning, Exception Criteria, and the Add Reminder. The system will review each job file at job creation and at job edit to check if the job file meets any of the workflow setup criteria in the company settings. If the job file meets any of the workflow setup, the system will launch the workflow based on the selected trigger. If enabled, the system will also send any email notifications to the designated job contact or employee, or add a log note to the job file. If the job does not match any of the workflow criteria in the company settings, no workflow will launch at that time. Starting with the top criteria, the sequence field allows the user to add a number designation to the workflow to identify what step the workflow represents overall, as multiple workflows for the same job type can be created. The parent field is also optional. If selected, the workflow will only be applicable to jobs that have this parent defined on the Jobs Relationship tab under the Parents tab. A parent is typically used when we're trying to isolate specific jobs. For example, if we have TPA jobs that will require a specific document or specific activity, we can set a parent at the job relationship level. Typically, the parents are assigned to the company, and once the company record is assigned to the job file as a relationship, that parent comes along and triggers the workflow. Our next field is location. It's currently set to select all. If you have more than one location in your database, you can certainly set your workflow to a specific location. Otherwise, we'll leave it as the default select all. Description describes the workflow for identification purposes. This description will be visible on the Job Workflow tab on the job file as well as in the Control Center. The job contact and the employee. This will allow us to assign the responsible employee type or employee that will be responsible for completing the workflow, or they will need to receive the workflow email notifications. The job contact will allow you to select an employee type, and the system will review the job's relationship type to identify which employees have been assigned to that employee type on the job file. Note that multiple employee types can be assigned to a workflow. Please note if the employee type assigned to the workflow is not assigned on the job relationship tab, the workflow will not launch as it does not meet the workflow criteria. If multiple employees have been assigned to the job workflow, as long as one of those employee types is assigned on the job relationship tab, the workflow will launch. The other option to using the job contact would be assigning a specific employee or employees to the workflow. In this instance, the employees do not have to be listed on the jobs relationship tab for the workflow to launch. The job contact and employee fields, however, cannot be used in conjunction with one another. It's either one or the other when assigning workflow. Also with the job contact, if we need to have the email notification sent to someone outside of the company, you can certainly use the briefcase icon here to flip from employee types to company types, which will then allow you to select an applicable company type. Our next field is building type, which also defaults to select all. If a specific building type is selected from the drop-down list, the workflow will only be applicable to jobs that have this building type selected on the job info tab. The job type will want to select the appropriate job type from the drop-down list and click the Add button. Now, by default, if you don't select any job types at all, the system will assume that the workflow is applicable to all job types. However, if we want the workflow to be specific to a job type or multiple job types, we do need to make the selection from the drop-down list and add them with the Add button, and we'll see them populate here on the screen. If I need to get a little bit more granular, I can certainly apply the criteria with a specific job subtype. I do, however, need to select the job type first. It will highlight in blue, which will then activate the job subtype, allowing me to see the subtypes that are linked to the specific job type. So here we're going to go ahead and just add flood, and we'll see flood get added. If I need a subtype from reconstruction, I can do the same process and make the new selection and click my add button. If I need to review what's been already selected, again, I can just flip between the two, simply clicking on the job type. The blue will indicate the active selection. Finally, we have the billing method. This is optional. The billing method does need to be set up first by a company administrator from the main menu settings, company settings, jobs. We scroll down into the blue hyperlink called Edit Billing Method. If no billing methods have been created in your company settings, this field simply will not be visible. Once it is created in the company settings, we will then see this field be visible on the job info page in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and then we'll also see the billing method populate here in workflow. Next section that we want to take a look at is the start trigger. If the job file meets the workflow criteria, the system will launch the workflow when the assigned starting trigger is added to the job file. The workflow starting triggers can be a job date, job info, job attachments, or a job note. The job date, we would select a specific job date when entered on the job dates tab to trigger the workflow. Job info, select a specific job field when entered on the job info tab to trigger the workflow. Job attachments, we would enter a specific named audio, directory, document, image, or video file, and when uploaded to the jobs attachment tab to trigger the workflow. When using the job attachment as the workflow trigger, the file must be named exactly as it is defined in the workflow setup, including the file extension. or we need to enable the fuzzy logic option. So here in this example, I select job attachment, selecting a document. That document file name that I'm looking for is work authorization. I do want to include the extension, and if I left it as is, the system would look specifically for work authorization.pdf. If it's going to be a variation of the file name plus the work authorization, we'd want to use the fuzzy logic. That way, if the work authorization is part of the file name, it will start the workflow trigger. Best practices when it comes to job attachments is using the Proven Jobs custom forms feature, as the system will be naming and uploading the file for the user. That way the naming convention is specified on those forms ahead of time. The user doesn't have to think about it, but it's not a requirement. The job note, we would select a specific job note topic, and when added to the job notes tab, to trigger the workflow. Note if you need to create a specific note topic for workflow, that can be done by an administrator. Again, in the company settings under relationships, click the edit topics. Once you have that topic created, you can come back and add it as the starting trigger. It's not required to create new topics, but I do find that you may want a specific topic used only for workflow. When using a job note with a specific topic, that topic can only really be used once. The workflow wouldn't be reoccurring. It's once that topic is used, it would satisfy the workflow, and it would no longer continue to launch, even if we used the same topic over again. So it's a one and done type of situation when looking at a job note. In this particular example, I did have this one set to a job date, it being the receive date, triggering the workflow. Now, going down a little bit further into the start trigger section, you'll notice some additional fields here. We do have a log note topic, we have a log template, we have a workflow title, we have note, as well as notification, log note, and show note checkboxes. So here at the bottom, we'll talk about the notification. This is optional, it's not a requirement. If an email notification needs to be sent to the assigned job contact or employee when the workflow starting trigger is added to the job file, we're going to check the notification checkbox. If we do this, we're going to need to enter a workflow title as well as the note. The title will become the subject of the email notification, and the note will become the body of the email. If we choose to select the log note, again, we need to focus in on the log note topic. This is the topic that will be used when the system adds the note to the job file, so you want to make sure you pick an applicable topic. I do recommend creating a topic maybe specifically for workflow so that you can tell the notes that are being created by workflow versus notes that are being entered by the users themselves at the job level. It's not a requirement, but certainly helpful when looking at notes on the job file, especially if workflow is going to be creating some of those notes. The show note would allow the user to see the body of the note here. Sometimes if we need to provide direction to the user on what needs to be done to satisfy this workflow, we would check that checkbox show note. The user would be able to see that information when satisfying the workflow. They would also be able to see that information in the mobile application. There's a little question mark that they'd be able to click on, and it would show them the note that we have entered here. So we use the note for a couple different reasons, depending upon which option that we're selecting. So in this particular case, the way I have it set up as the example, it would send an email notification out to the assigned PM on the job relationship tab. The email received would have a subject of new job. It would also include the job number and the job name and address as well. We would see in the body of that email the note that's displayed here. If we need to apply a template to a note, I do have an example of that here below. I have a template called new loss. That new loss template has templated fields in it built into pull and job information. So anything in these bracketed fields is going to look to the job and pull that information into those bracketed fields. You do need to create your log templates first before you would come in here and apply a template to the note of the starting trigger workflow. Those templates can be created by an administrator from the main menu settings, company settings. Under relationships, you would click the edit note templates. Our next section that we're going to review is our due and warning. The company administrator will need to enter the desired time allowance given to the workflow before the workflow is considered past due or in a warning status. The due will want to enter the total time allowance for the workflow in its entirety. If the workflow's ending trigger is not added to the job file before the due time, the workflow status will be listed as past due on the job workflow tab within the job file itself and within the control center. The unit of measure we'll want to select. We've got seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks. I usually like to stay with the same unit across the board if possible when setting up our due and warning, but it's not a requirement. So in this particular example, the overall workflow is due in 30 minutes, so they need to do received to contacted in 30 minutes. Otherwise, the workflow is considered past due. This workflow is going to put it into a warning stage at the 15-minute mark, meaning that the system is looking at the received date and doing that calculation. So 15 minutes from the received date and time, it would then send the warning notification out to the job contact or employee. If we have the notification checkbox checked here. If you do not want a notification to go out to the job contact or the employee, we'd simply uncheck the notification checkbox. Now, the workflow will still move in its status, but the notification just simply would not go out. So this would just update the workflow, but not send a notification to the assigned contact. Now, when this notification is sent out, you'll notice that the due and warning does not have its own note section. So it does look to the ending trigger note. So if you do have the notification applied for the due and warning, it is going to look to the ending trigger note. So you'll want to make sure that this note here in the ending trigger makes sense for a notification going out at the 15-minute mark or when the workflow is technically past due. And again, you'll want to pay attention to your workflow title, as that will become the subject of the email, and then the body of the email with the note. With the due and warning, it will also place verbiage in the subject line. It will say past due if it's past due. If it's the warning notification, it'll say warning. So it does give those visual cues to the user as to what warning it is, if it's the due being the past due or the warning. Our next section is the workflow ending trigger or end trigger. Very similar to the starting trigger, we have the same options available, but you'll notice there's an additional option here on the end trigger that we did not see with the starting trigger, and that would be the job checkbox. The job checkbox would simply be a checkbox that the user can check, indicating that they've completed the workflow. So if you can't find a job date or job info or job attachment or a job note with a specific topic to satisfy the workflow, you could use the job checkbox. Again, just very simply for the user to click off on the checkbox and it satisfies the workflow. You'll also see that we have the same log template available, again, to apply to the note field here if need be. Our workflow title. We do have a notification and log note checkbox for the ending trigger. Typically, if you have the notification applied for the due and warning, I do not recommend applying a notification and log note for the end trigger. You really can't use them into conjunction with one another since the notification is using the end trigger note box. Typically, these notifications would be sent at different times. So the message that we would need to send at the due and warning would most likely be different than what we would be using it as the end trigger. However, if you don't end up using the notification for the due and warning, you can certainly use the notification and the log note here in the ending trigger. This notification being sent out when the trigger is applied to the job file, and also the log note being applied at that time. So it's more of a past tense, like in this case, the contact has been completed. The next section that we're going to take a look at is the exception criteria. If the workflow is not satisfied within the allotted due time, the system will require an exception note to be entered by the user when the ending trigger is added to the job file. You'll see that we have a log note topic that is going to come into play if we use the log note checkbox. The system will automatically capture that exception and add it to the workflow. So you'll see it on the workflow tab at the job level. You'll also see it in the control center. But if you also want the system to add the exception as a job note on the job file, you will check that checkbox for the log note. And then you'll also want to make sure that you pick the applicable note topic. In this example, again, I created a specific topic for workflow just called exception, but you could certainly choose another topic of your choice. It does not have to be a custom topic. Your other option is the notification. This is optional. If an email notification needs to be sent to the assigned job contact or the employee when the exception note is captured, we're going to apply the notification checkbox and the system will send out a notification to the job contact. Now, it just depends on who's going to be satisfying your workflows. Typically, if the person satisfying the workflow is the job contact, you may not want to send them a notification because they're the ones that are ultimately satisfying the workflow. And then our last option is the incomplete. Again, an optional feature. If the workflow ending trigger has a possibility of not being able to be satisfied by the end user, check the incomplete checkbox. This will allow the end user, if needed, to mark the workflow incomplete by selecting a checkbox called Mark as Incomplete in the workflow action pop-up box. So when they're on the job file and they go to satisfy the workflow, it does pop open an action pop-up window, and within that window, they would be able to mark it as incomplete. Now, the end user will also be required to select a date and time and with that exception note as to why the workflow could not be completed within the allotted due time. So in this example, if the user goes over 30 minutes, the system then would require that exception note to be applied to the job file on the workflow tab. And then if we chose the log note, it would also capture that there as a job note. Just a note that, or side note, the ability to mark a workflow incomplete can only be done from the Proven Jobs web application. At this time, it's not available to mark incomplete through the mobile. Typically, when we're marking something incomplete, we're usually having that done by maybe an office staff member, someone working within the web application, not always, but majority of the time. We reviewed earlier that the user has to have the specific security settings in order to even mark a job incomplete. The benefit of this incomplete is that it pulls the job out of being past due and puts it into this additional stage or status of incomplete. So it doesn't look like the workflow is past due. It just can't be completed at this time, or it may not be ever be able to be completed. If the ending trigger does end up being added to the job file at a later date, it will satisfy the workflow and put it into a completed status. So if it does go incomplete, it can get pulled out of there by simply satisfying the workflow. The only exception to that is the job checkbox. If you do mark a job incomplete that has the ending trigger being the job checkbox, that checkbox disappears once it goes into an incompleted status, so you would not be able to pull it back out. But the other triggers, as long as they're added to the job file, it does pull it out of incomplete and puts it into completed status. Our final area that we need to review in the workflow setup is the add reminder. If additional workflow email notifications need to be sent outside of the due and warning times, a reminder can be added to the workflows. Adding a reminder is an optional feature, but not a requirement. If needed, multiple reminders can be added to the workflow. To add a reminder, we simply click the Add Reminder button. Once the reminder is added, we would then select our time, similar to like what we did with the due and warning. So this one is set to 10 minutes. The reminder is set to the project manager's assistant. Again, just like we had at the top there in the criteria, you can either choose job contact or employee, but not both, and you can select multiples if you need to. Again, being able to flip between the employee type and company type if need be. We'll see the workflow title, the workflow note. Like we were able to in the starting trigger and the end trigger, we can add a log note template. Again, this is optional, not a requirement. If you do want to apply a template, simply grab the template from the drop-down list and use the apply button to apply the template. If you do not want a template, just leave it alone. The system does default with that first topic in the list, but this doesn't necessarily mean that it's been applied to the note. We'll be able to type in our note. And then you'll also see that there is a checkbox here. If I want this reminder to be added as a job note as well, we would check the checkbox for note. In this particular example, at the 10-minute mark, we have an email notification going out to the jobs assigned project manager assistant. The workflow, or I should say the email subject will be confirm customer contact. And then in the body of the email, we'll see the following note appear. This field is not very big. You can certainly type it somewhere else and paste it into the note field if you want to review it before adding it. You can add multiple reminders. For instance, if I still want someone to be aware of this workflow even after the 30-minute mark, I can set this then for another reminder to be sent out at the hour mark, maybe back to the project manager, just confirming that they have made contact with that customer client. To remove a reminder, we simply use the orange sign to remove. I do want to show you what some of these workflow notifications look like. So for this specific example here from the received to contacted, I do have a few email notifications. So we'll take a look at that next. Here we have the workflow starting trigger. So you'll notice that it will list the job number, job name. It's the starting trigger workflow notification. See the workflow title, and then we will see the address of the job itself. We'll see that same information that we had here in our starting trigger. A new job loss has been received. Again, I had that template applied, so we're seeing in the bracketed fields now that job data coming from the job file itself. We also can see notifications coming from the warning. So this would be an example of the due and warning, the warning specifically. So at the 15-minute mark, if the received date or the contacted date had not been applied, the assigned job contact or employee would receive an emailed notification. Again, only if we have that notification checkbox checked for the due and warning. And then we would also see a notification for past due. So again, if the job was not marked contacted within 30 minutes, they would receive another notification indicating that it is past due. So again, giving those visual cues. So we'll see starting trigger, we see warning, we see past due. And then it would be very similar if we had an ending trigger, it would say ending trigger. So there is some visual cues within the subject of the email as to what stage of the workflow it's coming from. And again, it's looking to the notes to display in the body of the email there itself. For the past due, with the notification being applied, it's looking to this note here. Next, we're going to go in and take a look at an active workflow on a job file. So we'll go into our jobs, and we'll take a look at our job here for Robert, California. Now I've already triggered this workflow with the received date. So we're going to see the notes triggered on the job file. So here, if we had the system set to add a job note, we'll see that note added. We'll recognize the subject. Again, that's the workflow title, and then the body of the note itself in the starting trigger. The workflow themselves is within the workflow tab. This particular workflow is past due. There was a 30-minute allotment to satisfy. To satisfy this workflow, the end user is simply going to click on the blue hyperlink here under the action column. It does pop open the workflow action window. We'll see some information that we saw on the previous screen, the description, the due, the workflow title, the status of the workflow, job number, job type. And then since I had the show note applied in the starting trigger, it shows me that note. So again, I'm seeing that same information. Now, it may not be applicable in this particular case since I may not need to see that information, but if we were directing the user to do certain things or we wanted them to remind them to do certain things, you can certainly put that note. You'll notice that the contacted date is pre-filled with the current date and time. So if contact was made prior to, I can certainly select the correct date and time. But do be careful with that. If you do backdate, that can throw workflow notifications to send at one time. So we want to make sure that our team is adding job data in real time so we don't experience those types of complications where we'd receive multiple notifications. So we want to make sure that your team is actually adding the data in real time. They can do it here from the web application like we are, but the users also have the ability to go to the mobile application. So when they're in the field working on the job files, there is a workflow section within the mobile application within the job file that they can do the same thing that we're doing here in the web application. And we'll take a look at that here next. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we're just going to go with the current date and time. If I do try to save this workflow, we will see that we have that captured and it's been completed. Now you'll notice that when I completed the first workflow, it did trigger the second workflow. So my second workflow was a contacted to inspected. So now my next workflow has been launched and it's sent out notifications if we had the notifications checkbox checked on the starting trigger. Again, the users can click on the workflow action box to satisfy the workflow. If a job date is being used for workflow triggers, the user can use the action column to satisfy the workflow, or they can add the date to the job file directly. However, as long as the workflow is not past due. Once the workflow does go past due, it is going to want you to add the job date through the workflow action pop-up. The system will give you a banner saying, hey, you need to go and complete this workflow through the workflow tab. I'm just going to go ahead and save that and show you. It should move our next workflow forward. So now that I have my inspected date, we see two new workflows being triggered. One to capture a work authorization, and then one to dispatch the emergency crews. We'll take a look at the work authorization workflow in the mobile application so you can see what that looks like from the user perspective. So I have the mobile application open. I'm going to go into the jobs my schedule. I am going to locate the job here and make my selection. Once I'm within the job file, there is a workflow tab at the bottom, and you'll notice that there are no workflows populating. We do need to pull the active workflows down from the web application. So we're going to go ahead and click our button here to download, and you'll notice that the two workflows that I satisfied in the web application are showing as satisfied. They have the green with the checkbox, and then we'll see the additional workflows that still need to be satisfied. So the one in here particular is looking for the work authorization. You could certainly upload the document for here, but I do recommend, again, using our custom forms. So I'm not going to satisfy from here, but I'm actually going to go to our forms area and satisfy that way. So I'm going to go to forms. I'm going to use my magnifying glass, and then I'm going to select the form and add the form to the job file. I would then go ahead and fill out the form. The customer client would sign the form. I'd fill in any areas that need to be filled in for saving. I can sign as the representative. Property owner can sign. And then I can save my form. Scroll to the bottom here, and we're going to save. Now, once I save my form, it's going to go ahead and add the work authorization to the job file in the web application. And we should see our workflow get satisfied with that information. So now when I go back into my workflow, you can see that the work authorization workflow has been satisfied by using that custom form. Again, not a requirement. They could certainly upload a form from here or a completed document from here outside of our system if they're capturing it from another application. And we can see that we have another workflow here to dispatch our emergency crews. So this particular workflow is looking for an actual start date. So it'll tell us what the trigger is, starting trigger, and what is the ending trigger. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click on that and save. And that does trigger my next workflow in sequence. Typically, rule of thumb, you'll want to make sure that you're hitting your download button to make sure that we're seeing all of the active workflows. You'll notice at the top here, we'll also see completed workflow, not completed workflow. So if you wanted to filter and see only what hasn't been completed, you can certainly do that. So as I've been updating the mobile application back in the web application, that information's going back. You do need to have a positive connection with Wi-Fi or a cellular connection so that data can transfer. If you do complete the workflows from the mobile application and we don't have connection with cellular service or Wi-Fi or whatnot, the information will be held on the mobile application until we enter an area that has service or Wi-Fi to where it would upload that information to the web application. If you ever find that things are stuck, you can certainly go back to the main menu, or you can refresh here just on the job file itself. This will refresh at the job level, but typically I recommend just going all the way back out to the main menu by selecting our little house icon and then just running a full sync. The system will always show you the last time you've had a positive sync with the web application. So I'm going to go ahead and sync now, and that takes not too long. And then I can always go back and check and make sure there's nothing sitting in my sync info area. If we did have anything that was outstanding, you would see it visibly sit here in the sync info. I'm going to go back out to the web application. We're going to take a look at the control center. So we can satisfy workflow at the job level like we just did here from the web application or from the mobile application, or we can go to the control center. So I'm going to go into jobs, into control center, and we're going to see active workflow for all jobs. So if I am a user and I have multiple workflows that are assigned to me and I want to see big picture and see what workflows that I have outstanding, I can go into the control center, I can select the workflow tab, and I can see the active workflow. Now, the control center is set by the role security permissions to either view all jobs or view the user's own jobs. So right now I'm set to a view all, so I'm seeing all jobs, workflow for all jobs, not just workflow for myself. But however, if your security permissions are set to just view own in the control center, you will only see your own workflow in this area. So being that I'm seeing all workflow, I'm going to filter for just my own workflows that are assigned to me, and I can look and see what I need to do. I can also select the status buttons here at the top to show me which workflows need to be completed. If I want to focus in on the past due ones here, I've got quite a bit to work on. If I want to complete the workflow from here, I certainly can. I would click on, again, the action box that we saw at the job level. It opens it up and allows me to complete the workflow. For any reason, if I was not able to make contact with the customer, I can use the mark as incomplete. It could just be that the customer client is no longer available or the phone is disconnected. So let's say we just can't make contact. And we can save, and this workflow would then be put into an incomplete status. And I can filter for the incomplete. So you'll notice we'll have the new, warning, past due, completed, and that incompleted. So there's my exception note captured, the status of incomplete. If I need to go back to the job file, I can click the blue link here and it'll take me back into the job file, allowing me to look at the job detail. Going back into the workflow, we'll see that same information that we saw here. Again, there's that exception note. If you do apply that log note, we would also see it applied as a job note on the job file. This particular one isn't set up that way. Just so you know, you don't have to do a log note for the exceptions. They will be visible here in the workflow tab on the job file. This does conclude our Proven Learning Series session on workflow automations. We hope you found the session informative and valuable for optimizing your processes. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to schedule a personalized training session, please reach out to our PSA support team at support@canansys.com. Thank you for attending, and we appreciate your continued partnership and business.